Hello, welcome to Boundary Bottle once again. I am Bob Smith, your friendly neighborhood booze pusher. Today we are going to be discussing another sort of spring flavor for me, if you will, in the world of booze, and that's gin. So I consider myself somewhat of a gin head. I love drinking gin and tonics. It's kind of my go-to cocktail. I have explored the world of gin extensively for quite a while and luckily have a beautiful display of different gins from around the world. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about gin. It's often misunderstood. People often hate it or they love it. There's no in between. So I want to kind of dispel some of those rumors if I can. By starting out, I want to talk about basically what gin is. So gin and vodka are neutral grain spirits. They come off the still at a high proof, and you proof them down. And vodka is proofed down to 80 proof, and nothing happens to it. They bottle it. They can filter it many times, whatever they want. Gin maintains a little bit higher proof and is infused with botanicals. So essentially, they come out as the same thing and then are treated differently based on what your end goal is. Now, some people infuse the botanicals right into the pot still. Some use a basket for the botanicals that go into gin. There's a lot more we can go into there, but I don't have the time on this video. What I want to talk about really is the three different main styles of gin that we have going on in the world today. So the most classic gin started with the Dutch and a alcohol that they made called Genever, which basically is the grandfather or the father of what we know today as gin. Once upon a time, then the Brits adopted it. It's infused with juniper berries. So all gin by nature has to be infused with juniper to call it gin. Once you're infused with juniper, though, you can infuse other botanicals and kind of make your own flavor recipe and make your own proprietary gin. But the classic London dry gins, which is a major category, are high juniper based. So the best of which, Beefeaters, Bombay Sapphire, Tanqueray, those are all classic London dry gins. One of my absolute all-time favorites is Old Raj Red Label. Delicious London dry gin. Been around for a long time, has a little more character, a little softer on the palate than some of the others. But all great London dry style gins. Those are high juniper, more bitter, more intense gins. Now, come across the pond, we get into American style gin. Now, American dry gin is a newer category in the world. Things like Corsair gin, Farmer's gin, Aviation gin, those are considered American dry gins. So those still use juniper, but a little more of a softer botanical influence, a little more citrus based and infused. Blue Coat is a good example. Blue Coat American dry gin, obviously when the Redcoats were coming, the British, in Pennsylvania this is based, so they call themselves the Blue Coats, which were the other side of the Revolutionary War. More citrus infused, a little lighter, a little fresher. So that's American dry gin. And then we have what's called botanical gin. And botanical gin has really taken off in the last 10, 12 years or so. The biggest of which probably being Hendrick's, who kicked off the whole thing. Cucumber and rose petal infused. Pretty big on the market. But we've had a lot of smaller kind of acts get in on the game. Uncle Val's Botanicals, a super nice botanical style gin. The Botanist, all the way from Islay, from the Empire, the UK, but definitely not traditional London dry. Has some more fun botanical aspects in that guy. And then one of my favorites, St. George, Botanivore. So these guys used to make a vodka product called Hangar One once upon a time. Some of you may remember that. Sold that brand off and started a really cool brand called St. George. Super awesome. Also, one of my favorite gins on the planet. It's called Manifest. It's in Jacksonville, Florida. Unfortunately, we can't get it here in South Carolina yet, but it's only a matter of time. And then from there, we've actually jumped all the way around the globe, and Japan has started making some really interesting spirits. They're making, obviously, Scotch-like whiskey. Can't call it Scotch, but it's not from Scotland, but it is very similar. And then we also have some gins and vodkas, and I'd like to taste one of those gins, actually, right over here. All right. So this is Roku Gin from Japan, from Suntory Distilling. So Suntory is a very, very old company. They were the first major whiskey producer in Japan. A gentleman named Taketsuru was in Scotland studying in the 1860s, 1870s to learn how to distill Scotch whiskey. Fell in love with the daughter of a Scotch whiskey producer. As the story goes, brought a still back to Japan, and he was the first master distiller at Suntory Whiskey. He was there for about 10 years, and then in 1890 or 1900, he opened his own distillery called Nikka. So he branched off, but Suntory still exists, and Suntory bought Jim Beam a few years ago, which made them a major player in our market. But they distill a gin here called Roku Gin. Roku means 6. So they use 6 indigenous botanicals to Japan that you don't see anywhere else, which makes this a quite unique gin. So when you're tasting spirits, just like wine, a little bit of oxygen really helps a lot. But first and foremost, when I'm tasting spirits, I like to taste them neat. And you never want to stick your nose into a glass of spirit like you would a glass of wine, because all you're going to get is ethyl alcohol, and it's going to burn your nose hairs. Depending on the spirit, it might burn a lot. So when you're tasting spirits, you hold this glass about right here, depending on how long your face is, I guess, and you find your own little comfortable spot. But for me, it's about right here by my chin. And you're going to keep your mouth open slightly, and you're going to breathe in through your nose. Because what we know as taste, you only get 6 things here. You get sweet, sour, salt, bitter, and umami. Everything else comes from here. So anything that is rutabaga, celery, or daffodils, violets, all that's here. So you really want to get that scent up into your olfactory. And by doing so, keeping your mouth open, it creates a pathway for that. Smell a lot of like fresh kaffir lime. Very tasty. So the spirit on its own, wow, lots of lime. It's going to taste one way, but any good spirit needs just a little bit of dilution to release the aromatics. Much like wine needs oxygen, spirits need dilution. So retaste it. Wow, yeah, you get more lemongrass, more herbaceous notes after it's been diluted just a little bit. It's absolutely outstanding gin. For me, it's closer to a London dry gin, more classic, more old school, but with some interesting citrus notes to it. So that's my note on Roku Gin, and definitely season for gin and tonics is spring and summer. So come see me at the shop, and I'll get you hooked up. See you around.